Psalm 63 verse 3, David tells us, God's steadfast love is better than life. And I love that verse. The reason this verse means so much to me is because I went through a period of time some years ago that God really had to realign my heart. God really had to just strip some things out of my life and teach me that even though there were certain things that I was pursuing, maybe they were good things like missions or, building a church or doing things like that. They weren't necessarily bad in themselves, but what happened over time is I fell in love with doing those kinds of things more than really enjoying the love that God has for me and developing my love for Him. So this verse means so much to me because so often it just realigns my heart back to what should be the central thing of my life, and that's God's love, His steadfast love. So I want to just share with you a little bit about this because this verse has meant so much to me over the last several years. At this time in my life, I read a lot of C.S. Lewis, and one thing that I came across of C.S. Lewis, which his writings mean so much to me, but this particularly spoke to me at this season of my life. He shared about a young girl who lived in Britain who had a vast ocean. The Atlantic was right behind her neighborhood, but she was so young at the time. What she did was she would play in the mud puddles of the street. And I'll never forget reading about C.S. Lewis when he says that I would rather choose the vast ocean of God's love for me than to play in the mud puddles of the world. And I think this verse, when David writes, God's steadfast love is better than life, what he's saying is, don't play in the mud puddles of the world. If God's love is better than life, then God's love is better than anything that this life has to offer us. And the problem for you and I that live in this very affluent American culture, the problem that you and I have is really loving the Lord more than we love money or more than we love possessions. It's Jesus who taught us a man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. And that's hard for us as Americans who we are trained and we're taught accumulate and accumulate and accumulate. This verse really realigns my heart. If God's love is better than life, then God's love is better than anything that this society or this culture or this affluence has to offer us. Jeremiah 2 verse 13 really speaks to us as Americans. It says, "For my people have committed two evils," the Lord says. "One, they have forsaken me, the fountain of living water. And they have hewed out cisterns for themselves, broken cisterns, which can hold no water." And this is so often what we do. It is God who is the fountain of living water. And what's the glory of water? The glory of water is that it quenches. It'll quench a thirst. And there's so many of you watching today, and I know I've been there, where you're so thirsty in life. You're so thirsty. And nothing seems to satisfy. And it doesn't matter where you go or what kind of job you have or what relationship you're in or what income level you attain. It doesn't matter what you accumulate, you're still thirsty in life. And Christ says you've made this mistake. One, you've forsaken me because I am the fountain of living water. And you remember what He told the woman at the well? You drink of my water and you'll never thirst again. And God says the second mistake we make is that we make cisterns for ourselves. And the problem is that they're broken and they can't hold water. So what happens? We go through life and we go through our years and we go through our marriage and we go through our work life and we just go through life and we're thirsty and we're thirsty. And what happens? We drink, and what we're drinking is really sand. And the more we drink, the more thirstier it makes us. Only God can quench the thirsting of our hearts. Listen to what St. Augustine said. He said this, a father in the first century of the church. He said, "Our hearts are restless, and until they rest in God, they were made for God, and in God they find their rest." Our hearts are restless until they rest in God because they were made for God. Psalms 42 verse 1, David really got it. Verses 1 and 2 of Psalm 42, David said, "As the deer pants for the flowing streams, so pants my soul for you, O God. My soul thirsts for you are the living God." So are you thirsty in life? Does it seem that nothing satisfies? Are you chasing everything but the fountain of living water. If so, I want to encourage you today, surrender your life to God. Your heart is restless, and it will remain restless until it ultimately rests in God. So surrender your life and tell the Lord, I'm tired of trying to get other things to satisfy my soul. I need you, the fountain of living water, to satisfy me. And I promise you, God will be faithful to His Word, and God will change your life, and God will satisfy your heart and your soul.